Hello and welcome to Stronger. Today I have with me Diamond Faucha, Mark Wenzel, and Phil Merten. Typically, you'd see Diamond hanging out in the chat, but we've asked her to join us for today because she's actually one of the people that help us to arrive at the topic for tonight, which is gossip. Um, so we're going to kind of be having a conversation about that,
All right.
and we'll see where it takes us.
Very good. Here, here's to you, Diamond.
Yes,
Welcome,
thank
Diamond.
you. Thank you guys. Such a pleasure to
Welcome.
be here.
Okay. I can see this would be, for uh, the general heading of ministering to people, working with people who are coming from incarceration into Christian community. There's a lot of relevance here. Uh, there you can be very nervous coming into a situation like this. What are they saying about me? And boy, and we don't want to be messing that up. So yeah, we need to talk about this.
Mhm. Um, One of the rules that we've kind of set for ourselves here today is that as we are talking about gossip, we do not want to gossip, which is a general good rule of thumb anyway. But especially here, because no doubt I'm pretty sure there's going to be some points when it's tempting to bring something up when we're not really sure about a certain thing. So I guess really the first thing that we might want to talk about is really defining that term and thinking
Mm,
about what is gossip.
I was going to kind of go that same direction. I thought a word that popped in my mind was malicious gossip.
mm,
I don't know where that came from, um, but I think it's what is the intent? And I think a lot of times, as people who are ministering to others and we share a story, our intent is to illustrate something to help the group and not to cut down the other person and
hmm.
destroy them. That's my opening salvo there of thought.
Okay. The when we got together last, I was actually telling this story on me about how I told stories about somebody else. Uh, and it was just what you're talking about, Mark. My friend, and I'm going to mention her name, Mary, my late uh, lamented friend Mary, who I'd known for years and was such a struggling alcoholic and such a classic alcoholic that I every time I was doing a group with addicts, I could think of a Mary story that would illustrate what we're talking about because she was so classic, and I wouldn't say her name and thought I was being real cagey about her identity, but then when she checked into a residential treatment place where I was doing ministry, it didn't take long, and the other people there said, "Oh, you must be that lady that Pastor Phil is always talking about." Uh, and I didn't want that to happen. Fortunately, thank you, Mary. She was okay with that. She thought it was kind of amusing, actually. Uh, and it wasn't like I was telling secrets in a sense, because man, when Mary was like the Apostle Peter. When she messed up, she did it publicly. But still, I needed to be sure that was okay before I said that stuff. Now, like I said, she's in heaven. And like you were asking me before, Ruth, was she okay with it while she was on Earth? And she told me she was. So no reason why she isn't okay with it now. So gossip. Yeah, how do you define? Oh, I know. Oh, go. Somebody. I've been yakking away. Somebody else probably has something to say before I do more yakking.
I don't know. I think, as far as I'm concerned, I probably have a different definition of it than a lot of people do.
Hmm.
For me, I feel like it's gossip if you're talking about someone when they're not around to defend themselves. Yeah.
Okay. That's yeah, okay. Definitely one thing. Yeah, if I'm not here, you're talking. Yeah, phew. I thought too about the command about don't bear false witness.
Mhm.
Uh, Now, just because something is true, it's factual, I should say. That doesn't mean it's not false witness. I think false is about am I being true to this person? Uh, if I'm telling people something they have no right to know, that there's information about somebody they're not entitled to, even if it's factual information, that's false witness.
Mhm.
It's interesting. It's like, okay, what is our definition? If you think biblically, it's interesting. Most of the times the word gossip comes up is going to be in Proverbs,
Hmm.
and the first one that comes up, a gossip betrays a confidence.
Mm,
A trustworthy person keeps a secret.
okay.
And again, kind of going in that vein of
Hmm.
what are we, what's our intent? What are we doing with it? And I think, and obviously, if there's being trustworthy and not breaking a confidence, is what is that relationship that you have with this person? Um, is it, were things that were told, were they told in confidence? Were they told in public? Were they told?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and that gets, that obviously that gets a little bit tricky, and I think, um, and Ruth had brought up just a word that seems to make pretty good sense in a lot of this is the word consent.
Okay.
To think in terms of if I'm able to get, if I think this is a story that would be worthwhile and I could share, to ask for consent. And a
Hmm.
lot of times, when I've been in groups in the jail, and then it's kind of like, there it's kind of a public sharing of things. Um, and and then if I'm in the hospital room with one person talking, or one-on-one in the jail, even too,
Hmm.
and you kind of think, I guess I've never really thought through of the impact of it, or what could happen when you're doing that. And and that's why last week when or 2 weeks ago when we were talking about this, and Diamond kind of you know raised her eyebrows at us on in the chat. It's kind of like, this is something that needs to be talked about.
Hmm.
I think I'm at a point where I need to hear from Diamond a little bit on that, to say what is it that
Hmm.
was starting to trigger you a little bit, or get you kind of going about what we were saying, or what we might be saying right now.
I
So
think that a lot of things that I was feeling were coming from my life when I would catch people speaking on my behalf about something or telling a story from a different perspective that it wasn't meant to be told.
Ah.
And so, like, because even though gossip is not, gossip is one of those things that is fuzzy for someone like me because of my experiences with it. But, like, it's not always a bad thing. Like, it's not always malicious, if that makes sense. So, like,
Mhm.
is even though it's not always malicious, it's still, like we said, bearing false witness. Like I said, I have caught people telling a story of my own from a different perspective that it wasn't meant to be shared with. Like, I could share something with you, for example, and basically you can go and share that thing or that whatever, but you share it from a different standpoint,
Mhm.
which just makes me look like I'm a liar, or makes me
Ah.
look like, I shared my story with someone who doesn't understand where I was coming from.
Ah.
Again, going back to the bearing false witness. Now, even though, like I said, it may not always be a malicious thing, it may not always be bad intention, but it's still
Okay.
false. Which is why, like, for me, I kind of blanket all of it, good, bad, or ugly. Gossip is gossip
Mm.
because of how things and information can be misinterpreted, misconstrued, and even not just on that one level of, like, say you're telling my story, but somebody could be telling somebody else that you told my story to could be telling my story just because they heard it from you. And so it's even that idea that it could become gossip, even if you're just sharing a testimony, because people are not aware of the entire situation. Because I'm not there, the original person is not there to actually validate or explain or give an understanding or defend themselves, you know, to whomever the story is being shared with. And so, yeah, that's why it was a bit triggering for me, you know, and I don't know, I'm still working through some things, but yeah, I'm kind of like Ruth here. It's like gossip is just simple as that. Like, you're saying something without another person or the person that you're talking about being there to defend themselves.
Okay. That's, man, appreciate that perspective. Yeah. My story, you're telling my story, but you're not telling it from my perspective, and you're putting a spin on it, or you're getting a the conclusion is not quite the conclusion that I would have gotten. Yeah, all those things. That's good. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. The yeah, the
while you're
Changing scenes.
yeah, I think that's what
All
threw me a little bit.
fancy.
right.
But
Oh man, it doesn't
Yeah.
take anything to shake us up and say, well, blah, blah, blah.
but it just
Now, yeah, go ahead.
it does, kind of remind me of, like, well, like Phil, you up group, they're all at a level where they're sharing their stories. And
right.
when we're facilitating a group, and so it's not the traditional 12 like we might be doing, because we're like a facilitator, then we're listening into these other stories.
Right.
And and then it's like, then our desire that we want to take this, because we don't always have our own story at that point, or we're not thinking that we have a story. And I think, and I definitely, over the course of the years of being a chaplain, have come up with a lot more where, well, here's my story, here's my experience of what I did. When I'm preaching a sermon now, I'll talk about, well, this is what I did in this situation. And try a little bit less to think of, well, here's somebody else's. But then, of course, another is to think, well, what is your story? What is your experience here?
Yeah.
Usually, but to invite them to put themselves into the story, their self else, and saying, well, that doesn't really fit with I'm not like that. Is where we can go easily. So that's where I go with that. And again, Diamond, thanks for sharing that, because
for real,
and really, especially that I'm telling a story. Am I getting it right? Am I sharing the same perspective, or have I spun it to my needs? Yeah.
I had a friend of mine, a pastor from another state, call me one time, and he was kind of laughing about this and said, so are the rumors true, Phil? I said, which rumors? And he said, the rumors that you have started a healing ministry and that you've raised a child from the dead. And I said, what? And we tried to piece together what was going on, and it seemed to trace back to a presentation I had given at a seminar quite a while before that. I had encouraged the people in the seminar to think of times and share with their own little small breakout group times that they had seen God show up and answer a prayer in an unexpected way, or seen God do small miracle, large miracle. I encourage people to tell stories, and so I told a story of my own about a time that prayed for this out of control and child with out of control ear infection that to my astonishment anyway, the bone that had deteriorated healed up. Little boy going from being on an ICU went home within a day or so. It was just I was amazed, and I told that story. And telephone game took over apparently, and by the time it got to these bunch of pastors who I guess didn't care for me much anyway, they decided that I was claiming that I had raised a baby from the dead. And I always thought, yeah, and what if I had? Are you going to kick me out of the church because I raised a baby from the dead? What?
Yeah, no, that's
All
funny.
right. So I think we have successfully talked about what gossip is. I think also at this point, it would be important to talk about the effect that gossip can have when it comes to ministry. And here, like with Stronger, we're specifically focused on ministry and walking with returning citizens and their families. But also, when we're talking about gossip, it goes beyond that as well. Because gossip can destroy relationships and it can also like erode trust. And both of those things are issues that can tear away at ministry and also at the church in general.
Absolutely. Yeah, that bit about eroding trust. Boy, I'll never open up to that guy again. And boy, what's if he's saying this stuff about this other guy? What's he saying about me? Yeah, that it just messes up everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in ministry, this idea of testimony. I feel like gossip and the the way that people can kind of misinterpret gossip as testimony.
Mm,
They'll use someone else's testimony as a form of manipulation and
mm.
gaslighting. So if you want,
Oh,
like, if we were to talk about ministry, especially when I look at certain ministries or types of churches, they would be like, oh, well, this person did this and therefore you can do it too. And that can
mm,
affect both sides of that, of the person who shared the story, their testimony, and then the person who's hearing the testimony from another person or from a minister, from a pastor even.
mhm,
And I find that very, very harmful in a lot of ways, especially when you are talking about people who are coming into a new or into a ministry or into a church, and they're looking for something, and they're being basically gaslighted with someone's testimony, you know,
mm,
by use of gossip, whether it's a gossip from the minister themselves or from like another person in the ministry. And yeah, it's really
mm.
interesting, which is another, by the way, trigger for me. Anyway,
Ah,
more therapy. But I think that that is important to talk about, especially when it comes to diversity.
mm.
Um, and I don't want to get too touchy
Yes.
there, but say a person of color goes into a predominantly white church and they hear something like that, and that very thing happens to them. It's like you don't understand that person's experience,
Yeah.
that particular person of color's experience, just because you, as a minister, have heard a testimony from another person of color. Using tokenizing that other person's testimony or
Mm,
that other person and gaslighting this new person of color
mm.
as we go into diversify ministry. So like there's so many layers and levels there. And yeah, I just wanted to maybe put that, maybe that's something that we should definitely talk about in more detail, especially from the both of you, Mark and Phil. You are ministers yourselves. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how would you deal with that?
Mm-hmm. When you talk about it as gaslighting, I think I go back to what you said about somebody telling my story but putting a different spin or getting it getting it wrong. Uh, Boy, how easy it is to. Whew, somebody's talking about how traumatized they were, how terribly, terribly hurt they were by the way they were diminished, minimized, disrespected, and it can be so easy for somebody retelling that story who's never experienced that kind of thing to just totally minimize it, not catch the trauma, and then wow, it sounds like, well, you're crazy. You think there was a real problem? No, it's just a little misunderstanding. That the person who was traumatized needs to be the one who says, no, here's how it happened. Here's how it impacted on me.
Yeah, I think one of the things that can happen is, especially if we're looking at the diversity side of things when it comes to ministry, is that someone who is in ministry can look at person X's experience and their reaction to that, and then look at person Y and go, okay, person X doesn't have the right to feel what they're feeling because this other person doesn't feel that way.
Okay. Yep.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was getting at, Ruth. So yeah, and I noticed that, like, and I don't mean to get too personal, but I've noticed that between me and you, Ruth. I mean, you and I have gone to college together. We've experienced ministries together, and I've noticed that that's happened between us, and it's crazy. Like, I don't want to get into any details, but like, for example, because she and I do have different perspectives on certain things, I have been, on the side of being gaslighted. They're like, oh, Ruth doesn't feel that way. So why do you feel that way? This is
Ooh.
what Ruth has gone through, blah, blah, blah. She's just like you. And it's like, wow,
Ah,
okay then.
oh, gee.
So like that actually for a while made me push away from the church altogether, even further.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I don't know if anything like that has happened with you, Ruth, but it's like that right there really does bring it home for me.
Hey.
And that's something that I really think is extremely important moving forward with our goal here.
Okay. So situations where kind of two of you pitted against each other. Well, you experienced this way, but she experienced it a different way, and her way of experiencing it must be valid, and yours is invalid.
I would say
Yikes.
two things to that. One, I hear what you're saying because I have also experienced something similar with people like evaluating us and like comparing that way. But something else that I would say is even in the middle of that, like, and this is kind of going back to what we talked about like on Friday, which is masking is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn how to hide certain things even if that's not necessarily how you feel, which
Okay.
is not good.
Okay. Yeah.
But all of that needs to be taken into consideration when looking at people's perspectives.
Just because they didn't say this really hurt me doesn't mean it didn't really hurt them. So one person is more vocal about it than another. Then, well, I believe the person who wasn't vocal. Yeah.
Yeah, people tend to want to believe whichever one is less painful for them to
Yes.
experience.
Exactly.
They want to say like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well,
Mm-hmm.
I can handle this person because they're not going to bombard me with information. Whereas back in college, y'all, I was like kind of considered by some ministries as, I don't know the word, should I say toxic?
Next to
No,
the devil.
yeah, I was basically the devil because I would come out and say XYZ. I was unapologetically black. I was unapologetic about what I believed, and
Right.
I was unapologetic about my questions. And I never understood masking. Like, I grew up in a way where I was surrounded by people that looked like me a lot. And then even those, like, when my father remarried, that woman's family, like my stepmother's family, she is white. But the thing is, her family was so embracing of us. I never had to deal with basically, quote unquote, a different kind of white person when I got to college. I was not aware that these people even existed. I didn't really understand covert racism or covert discrimination until I got to college. And I think that kind of protected me because I still was very vocal. I still was very like, I'm gonna say what I gotta say, because when growing up in Mississippi or even younger, my younger years in Texas, I grew up around overt racists. They were like saying the N-word to my face. Nobody had secrets. When I got to college, I learned a different thing. I learned about masking. I learned that was a thing, especially whenever people would compare me and Ruth, and they were like, well, she's not like this, she's not like that, I'd rather deal with her. Diamond's hard to deal with. It's like these things like that. It's like, wow, well, what's going on? I'm grateful that Ruth and I were friends because we were able to speak about certain things and share ideas. But yeah, it's like, You know, like she said, masking is a real thing that I was late to the party on. But yeah, I think that really did have a big impact on mine and probably other people's experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, I would
I'm
say
asking. Go ahead.
as far as masking, probably something that didn't help was um, growing up with basically a drill sergeant as a father,
Hmm.
because you learn that probably more than you would learn like in other environments and in other places like that.
Excuse me. On a little different subject, something I've been thinking about with this is um, the impact of gossip. Okay, if somebody's telling my story, one of the things that you kind of got at this before, Diamond, but it's my story. It's my story to tell, and if I tell it, it would be, well, it's because I want to share this. It's from my perspective. It's something God gave me, and I share it as a free gift, not because it's torn away from me. I've had that happen where I was had an experience that I really wanted to talk to some people about, and uh, they somebody else beat me to it and started saying, "Here's what happened." It's like, but that's my story. I wanted to tell it. Uh, and it wasn't just being proprietary. It wasn't just about ownership. It was I had some things in there that I wanted to share, some things that were mine to share because I thought they were important. I wanted to give them to you, but somebody took them away and gave them to the other person without my permission. Didn't appreciate it.
Yeah.
I guess my question now would be like, how do ministries combat gossip? How do they preach about the woes and the problems that come about with gossip, and how would we actually go about accepting people as they are, not treating a community as a monolith, especially when it comes
Oh
to
boy,
diversity, to avoid gaslighting by
yeah.
way of gossip? How do you deal with all of that? I know that was like 3 whole questions, but y'all got
Yeah.
this.
Well,
I'm going to take that.
On your market, set, go.
I would say when it comes to that, one of the most important things I would say is letting the Bible be the Bible. Because one of the things that I've noticed when it comes to conversations about gossip, especially in churches, is that there is a tendency to kind of soft pedal that. And I imagine probably part of the reason for that specific thing is because there are pastors, ministers, and the like who have difficulty with that, and they want to go, "Oh, I'm not so bad," and kind of make it out that way. The other thing is when it comes to creating environments um, where gossip is discouraged and where people are able to be themselves in that without worrying about gossip. I would say that it's important to move away from some of the philosophies that are kind of snuck into the church. And I would say one of those would be something that we've talked about a couple of different times in the past, which is moving away from politics. Because as you talk about things that are necessary and steps that are necessary in order to help other people to feel more comfortable and to move away from communities where masking is basically still necessary as a survival mechanism, if you just want to kind of go along to get along. I'm not saying that that's a good thing by any means, because I mean ultimately masking is tiring in itself, but it's going to be important to get away from that, because when you bring up these conversations, another thing that you hear is language of the Constitution as opposed to language of the Bible. And what that tells us is that there is an emphasis that's focusing on my rights and my fear that if this thing goes into place, my rights will be trampled on. We aren't able to see what's necessary for others to be in a place where love is experienced, because of the fact that we're still living and operating in a place of fear. And I would say, as far as getting out of that place of fear, what we see in scripture is very clearly God identifying that perfect love is what drives out fear. And then when we're looking at love in itself, one of the most quoted passages when it comes to love would be 1 Corinthians 13. And as we're looking at that, especially when we go around to, I think it's about verse 7, when you start looking at those verses, really what you see laid out, at least what I see laid out, is an ecosystem of love. So you see love always protects, always trusts. Love is not going to trust unless it feels as though it is being protected.
Yeah, good point.
So
well put.
Those are the kinds of things that I feel like are really important as we're having this conversation.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mic drop.
Yeah. She said a lot there, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can. I don't want to respond to it and muddy it up. Trying to do that. What I was thinking when we were talking about, groups of people and how we, both of you, Diamond and Ruth, brought up how, you can be lumped into a group, and why aren't you being like the rest of the group, or why aren't you being like that person in this group? And then when you brought it over towards the church, it's like we pastors, we talk about various groups within the Bible all the time: the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Jews, and they just become this monolithic group that we stuff all of this stuff into. And well, don't be like them. And okay, well, and then somebody says, well, okay, I'm not like the Pharisees. I don't do that. And we're good. This whole thing, kind of takes me. I'm trying to think of, when we're talking about returning citizens, people coming out of jails and prisons, and they, the mask thing just kind of keeps floating in and out of this too. Like you say, they're going to be wearing various masks for survival's sake, and to treat each one as an individual is so very important. And I think I keep coming back to that in my own brain every time I think of doing ministry. It's like one of the thoughts I've had is I don't minister to groups. I don't minister to isms. I don't minister to things like that. It's individuals. It's who am I seeing today, and trying not to even, and if they're part of a group, which they are in different ways, to always keep that way off to the side and see who's this person right now in front of me at this point in time. And that's a challenge because my brain wants to simplify things, put them in a group, and well, you're all like this. Prisoners are like this. Ex-prisoners are like this. This is, and it's like, no, what is the questions? What is it that you need? How can I help you today? And it's a big thing I do in the hospital individually, but I bet I don't give it as much thought in the community or in, with ex-offenders in that. And so that idea of really, looking at an individual as an individual, seeing them for who they are, and where they are right at that point in time, not where somebody else is, but where they are, not where I want them to be. And, not in respect to where I want them to be, but where are you right now? How can I help you and see you and be with you right here? And I've struggled with that at times where it's like, you're not where I want you to be by this time. And what's your problem?
There you go.
And you start to, mistreat them in ways. I struggle with the term gaslighting. I always like, what's the proper use of that term? And it just doesn't fit my brain. So I'm not going to throw it out there like I'm doing that, but if you want to identify it for me. And, and and I kind of go back to masks, and then I got to stop talking for a sec too. But masks on the one side, and that's what I heard on Friday, and I'm hearing today again of the necessity sometimes of needing a mask for survival, and that also happens. Well, I guess it still is kind of the same thing. I see people that'll put on the mask of their mask of righteousness, their mask of Christianity, their mask of, okay, I'm going to say all the right words right now because that's what's expected of me. And it kind of signals, hey, I'm okay. And because that's what I'm supposed to say. Yeah, and that's, there's a part of it where I'm supposed to say it. That's pastor told me I should say when somebody dies or something like that. But it's also sort of a survival mechanism at the same time of, I feel like I can't go there into that dark place. I need the light of the gospel. I need to hear what Easter says to me. And I'm going to keep repeating it until it sinks in. But that's not always helpful in that respect either. With that, I will pass for a few minutes on to others.
I liked something that was coming to me when you talked about politics and masking. These two things came together in my head about how if I'm coming into a church and I'm hearing the pastor, if I'm hearing other people who seem to be representative of the church, and they're all talking about those people, and they single out, let's say, people who are politically in a different place than they are. I'm talking about those people, those liberals, those conservatives. This is what they're like, blah, blah, blah. Okay, then I'm coming in and I'm like, you're kind of talking about me because I believe this stuff that you're saying is so bad. I identify with some of the stuff you're talking about, but I better shut up about it so I fit in. Because I don't want them to be pointing at me and saying, "Oh, you're one of them." And boy, that to say we all vote as a block in this church. We all we all think the same way about all the same issues, and we all drive the same kind of car, and we all listen to the same music. That's going to be telling anybody who's not quite in that box, you don't belong here.
I would say that kind of thing, and having to be in that position where you're constantly having to do that is not helpful. It's very harmful, and I don't recommend it.
And part of false witness, it's not just about individuals, but it's about individuals I know, but public figures and political parties. If you're gonna, don't be spreading stuff that isn't verified, is not helpful. I can think of this is a stupid example, but it stuck in my craw. I was at many years ago. I was at a presentation given by the school to PTA at this Christian school. Anyway, it was the truth about rock music. Anybody old enough to remember the anti-rocks movement?
Oh, you mean when they were saying rock was of the devil?
Oh yeah. Well, anyway, the presenter was a guy I liked. He was, but he'd gotten a hold of some material, and he was presenting this material verbatim from his whatever it was. And I just remember one of them. I was kind of doing a slow burn thing. Okay, you got some valid points, but your overall spin on this is, I don't like it. And then somebody brought up from the audience, and KISS stands for Knights in Satan's Service. That's what I just blew
That
up.
was a reach.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was.
Oh, that was said so many times. And look at the shape of the S and everything.
Yeah. And I just lost it then. I was like, no, it doesn't say that. I'm not a fan of KISS, but they've said that they have the name KISS because of kissing. They like KISS, and quit spreading those rumors because they aren't verified. But People do that. That's. I'm telling a story about a public figure that is it's not verified, but I heard it from a Christian source. I ever got it on the internet, and the internet never lies.
Yeah, those music things kind of get me because I mean, if we're gonna go by that and by the supposed roots of things, then I mean, I'm sorry, but y'all lose a mighty fortress.
Come on. Yep. Not church roots to that song.
Alcohol is
What?
so terrible.
Yeah, the melody.
Oh, the
Luther.
melody.
Yeah, he takes on. Hey, that's a good melody. Where'd it come from? People
A
sing it in
bar?
bars. So what? It's a good melody. He had no problem
I
with
don't
that.
know if I want that. I've read various things around that, and
Yeah.
when they talked about bar, and it's actually the term bar, of course, is used in music
True.
to delineate your measures, and
12-bar blues.
that was something new.
Okay.
Or is he talking actually a bar where you're drinking, or is he talking about no? This is actually barred music. It's got that. I don't know. That I never delved into those and going, yeah, right. This whole conversation, and we're kind of sliding here and there with it, but it really comes back down to concept of what is good conversation. What is our goal in when we are conversing, and as pastors, of course, we're expected to hold forth in a monologue for 20 minutes if you're losing on a Sunday morning. And how do you fill that space? Because natural conversation is give and take. To me, that's not natural. And there's, and so how do you, unless you're really, really gifted orator, you end up pulling from other things and saying things that, maybe we shouldn't be saying, and just watching how we each of, in those settings, are we making generalizations? Am I making generalizations right now? Am I?
Good questions to ask yourself always.
Yeah.
I think,
And thinking of, and I always think too of a lot of, again, content wise. Am I talking about, like you said in that one, sermon, those people over there, or am I talking about my experience in life with God? That's important. Which way are my fingers pointing most of the time when I'm talking about different situations? I think that's where we can really get into the bad kind of gossip thing. It's like, when we group those people, those Catholics, those Lutherans, those people, it's so easy to fall into that, to compare ourselves that way. And then just like we sometimes see it, and pull it out of the Bible that way. Thank goodness I'm not like that tax collector.
Yeah.
Those sinners over there.
The chilling effect that can have, even if I'm not part of the group that is currently taking the heat, and I'm still thinking, but what if I was? And what if at some point they start shooting at the group that I am part of? What are they going to be saying about me? So it's just very chilling effect. I think I keep coming back to my story is my story to tell. It's my story to bless people with. I told you when I gave that example to that group about the seeing, wow, God really showed up to answer to that prayer. Wow, that was my story. And people took it and ran in the wrong direction with it and messed it up. But still, it's the risk you take. I set it out there to bless people. If they choose to use it otherwise, well, what can you do? Still got to keep trying to bless people. I've got a story to tell. And it's my story. And here is see if this helps you. Uh, you look at the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book. Uh, about half the book is taken up with people's stories. People sharing their stories about their out of control alcoholism, how things changed when they went into recovery, story after story after story. They wanted to share their stories. They said, people need to hear these stories. I'm willing to share it. Uh, I think in the Bible, I like taking the example of Jonah. Look at how bad Jonah looks in the book of Jonah. I mean, boy, he comes out looking really, really stupid. Uh, and okay, if you're going to take that story literally, these are things that actually happen. Well, how could anybody have known those embarrassing details about Jonah? Because Jonah told them. He said, "Here, you need to hear the story about this really bad time in my life. Let me tell you my story." That was his story to tell. If he chose to embarrass himself, that was his right. He thought it'd be a blessing, and it was.
All right.
Good.
Well, I feel like that's a good place for us to close today.
Okay. All right. Man, glad to be able to have all of y'all be with us and talking about this. This is great. Diamond, glad you could join us for this thing. That was neat to hear your perspectives and your experience. Thanks.
Anytime.
All right.
Anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Mark gets to pray.
But what if I want Phil to pray?
Hey, Phil gets to pray.
Sorry, can't hear you. Bad connection. Internet went out.
So Phil doesn't want to pray today.
You
Mark just
funny.
blanked his screen.
He was like, nope, nope. It's got to be one of y'all, right?
Phil doesn't want to pray, so Mark.
All together now, let's sing.
Yeah.
Amen.
Praise God. All right. Lord God, thank you for this time together that we get to share our perspectives, to hear different perspectives, to meet each other as individuals here in this place, in this space. And our prayer today is that our conversation is one that gets other people thinking, think how they tell stories and their stories and other people's stories. And of course, we always want to stay away from ever telling things that are hurtful of others. That's bottom line. But help us to work together to share your story, and then mostly how does that story impact our lives. Thank you for this blessed of this time together. Keep all who will be listening to us safe and blessed as well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 All right.
Amen.
And did we get a cat butt there? No.
No, I didn't miss that. Oh, there it is. Cat butt. Nice.
Twerk.
Okay.
Yeah. Good talk, y'all. It's fun.
Thanks. Yep.